Hey, what's up, guys? PDC here, and we are back again for round 6 of the DPP Invitational. And this time we have Pideous versus Martial Law. Pideous is here, obviously, and Martial Law is over here. He's Mentally Obscura. Don't know where that name is from, but whatever. Anyways, a little bit about these two players. Pideous, or Eve, she is I wouldn't really say a new DPP player. As far as I know, she's been around for a while. But she won the last DPP Invitational that was hosted by Jirachee, I think, around 2 years ago, I think it was. And really made a splash in the meta. And she convincingly beat BKC in the finals in a really great series of games. So Pideous is no joke, and she is known for innovation in DPPL. She pulled out some really interesting techs like Venusaur and Steelix, and Martial Law is actually known for the same thing, or at least he was during his first run as a top player. Martial Law won Smoke Tour around 10 years ago when DPP was still in it. And he was known for using some very unorthodox picks in DPP, such as his famous Calm Mind Cresselia, which actually became a mainstay in the metagame for a little while when Doug Trio was really popular and allowed. Anyway, both these guys are top players, or at least in the tier, they're top players, and they have won a big DPP tournament, both of them prior. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup, and let's go ahead and get started. So we are going to see a Jirachee versus a Zapdos. So unsure on the team style as of right now. Could be anything. Pideous is going to pivot the Swampert, and we're going to see a T-Wave from Martial. And right now it's looking like, well, 2 turns in, we can already kind of tell what this is. This is looking to be a pair spam team from both of these players. Typically, the way these teams kind of, it's going to be a two-way fest. Typically, the way these teams kind of shake out is they have a Zapdos, Celebi, Starmie as a spinner because you want to get rid of hazards, which also might have T-Wave. Multiple para-spreaders like T-Wave Zap, Body Slam Jirachee, or T-Wave Jirachee. And then they have something like a Rhyperior or a T-Tar, that can act like a breaker, and that really can take advantage of paralysis. So Rhyperior, its speed is its biggest inhibitor, but if you pair everything, well, it can become really, really deadly. So Swampert is going to be the counter here. Martial's going to probably throw off Earthquake. Roar is going to, Roar's going to come out, and we're going to probably see Starmie. Okay, so Martial's last 2 Pokemon, it's almost always going to be the same. It's going to be a T-Tar and a Jirachee. Rhyperior really appreciates Sand Support because it gets the special defensive boost. And a lot of Rhyperior's checks, like Latias and water types and ghosts, can be pursued by T-Tar. But overall, the sand just makes it so that Rhyperior doesn't die to every single special hit, because it is actually really quite frail. And its typing is not the best for any weaknesses either. It dies to, without sand, it's going to fall, even with solid rock, to most hidden powers with investment, and especially any sort of water move that's stab. So we're going to see Martial Law get a Surf Crit on the Pert. This is probably max HP, 0 attack Pert, along with max HP Starmie. And we see Pideous go ahead and go to T-Tar in an attempt to trap the Starmie. And we'll see if she can do it. A Pursuit would be really nice here. And she gets the Crunch. Okay, perfect. And that means that if she gets the chance, the rocks will go back up again. But that is kind of... yeah, it might be a little difficult because Swampert is at 20%, 14 after rocks come up again, but it's very possible considering Martial's team looks really slow. Pert can maybe get in on a Rhyperior double and get the rocks up, which would be really good. So, whoa, okay, well, anyway, we're going to see a Surf to break the sub and a Mega Horn, which is, that is really something you don't see a lot often on Rhyperior. Usually it's sub SD or it's Rock Slide Fire Punch. Mega Horn is an interesting take. I guess it works really well because it does Oko Starmie and it almost certainly sends Celebi to the moon. So that's an interesting take. It's probably Mega Horn, Earthquake, Fire Punch. If I were to guess, it could be Rock Slide still, because Rock Slide still with Para can annoy Skarm, but I'm not really sure. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and see Celebi come out and absorb the Breloom. Without a spinner, this is actually a little bit annoying for Pideous because I think she probably expected Starmie to live any hit Rhyperior could hit it with, and then she could have the option of winning a 50-50 and keeping Celebi or keeping Starmie around because all things considered, Marshall is likely not keeping Rhyperior, his obvious win con, in on something which an Okoid. So we're going to see a Jirachee go for a flinch here, and Marshall's going to keep the Rhyperior in. It's not going to take too much from Iron Head because it's a solid rock, and just its natural, really incredible bulk, but there's no reason to let it get flinched to death, so we're going to see a pivot to Zapdos, and probably another T-Wave or a double back to Rhyperior here. That wouldn't surprise me. Okay, we see a Hidden Power and a Body Slam. Okay, and no pair from the Body Slam. So I guess, I mean, Marshall can just T-Wave here. Yeah, that'd be pretty smart. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I get T-Wave there is the best, move you can have. I mean, this could be Refresh Jirachee, but usually you don't see it in the lead slot. I would just guess it's Protect through attacks or Wish Protect Jirachee. Or maybe U-Turn. That is an option too. But now that Jirachee is slower than Rhyperior, Ripe becomes even more dangerous. So we see Pideous Wish Pass to Zapdos on the ice, which is going to kill it. And yeah, this looks really, really tough for Pideous because now her team struggles with everything on Marshall's team, basically. And if the Zapdos is able to, well, that's really, really, really unfortunate. Because now I don't think there is a way that Pideous can win unless this Breloom has something like Swords Dance, which it doesn't look like it does because it's Focus Punch. And yeah, Zapdos is just going to totally clean up Pideous' team. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, the best case scenario for how Paraspam usually works. This game, I don't think there was really a lot of extremely, certainly there's nuanced play, but this is a different type of game insofar that it really is just an example of let paralysis do the work. The reason why Para is, Para spam, I guess you can call it, although to be honest with you, a lot of teams that are not the traditional, 6 or so Pokemon you see on Para spam carry T-Wave or paralyzing moves nowadays, so it's kind of an interesting style. But the traditional Paraspam that you're seeing here from Marshall, and I guess also technically even Pideous, the traditional Paraspam is very recognizable, it's very, very straightforward to play, and it's also really, really deadly. And versus certain teams that don't have any real speed control or ability to absorb status, it can be quite difficult, and that's why it is such a good enabler of things like Rhyperior, which end up just sitting there and using its immense attack stat and pretty solid coverage to just absolutely destroy opposing teams. So we're just going to see this kind of Jirachee versus Zapdos game play out here, and yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way for Pideous to, yeah, it's probably Scarf Tar, or it could be Bantar, but Zapdos either way is likely going to be able to just PP stall Pideous' team. And Rhyperior can come in basically whenever it wants. Marshall can even go to his own Jirachee if he wants to and try and just force progress, because Jirachee can, it has Fire Punch, so it's going to be able to beat Jirachee in the long run, and obviously pressure Tar. And Pideous does not have the PP to manage to beat Zapdos, and especially now that it has the Roostoff there, T-Tar cannot OHKO it. Scarftars don't even usually run, which that is a Scarftar, don't even usually run Stone Edge anymore. Instead, they usually will either run Stealth Rock in the lead slot, or they will run Ice Punch instead. I guess it's a bit, it's a bit disingenuous to say they don't run Stone Edge anymore, because they obviously still run Stone Edge. But you don't see it with as much frequency as you once did. Crunch and Pursuit are really the defensively enabling moves. But anyway, we're gonna see the Rhyperior cleanup here, and yeah, okay. Well, I guess substitute for posterity. Well, actually, no, I guess that's the safest play because that is probably okay. Yeah, okay, you're right. That actually was pretty. That was safe by Marshall because that way, sub blocks any sort of potential shenanigans from Paraspam. But I think the Jirachee was at this point it had. Yeah, I think it was probably outstalled by Marshall's Jirachee anyway. So, first game over. Let's go ahead and go to. Yep. Let's go ahead and go to game 2, and let's see what these two players are going to bring this time around. So Pideous is going to lead with Hippowdon and Marshall with Empoleon. So Pideous on the back foot here, probably going to have to be forced to switch and into a Starmie. Okay, well, Starmie is not the best Empoleon switch because Grass Knot is doing like 60% to max HP Starmie or more. We see a spin, and do we see Grass Knot for Marshall? Yes. Oh, yeah, okay, that really stings. What I always find interesting is that a lot of defensive teams do struggle with Empoleon a lot in the lead slot because often the lead slot of a defensive team is going to be something like Hippowdon or T-Tar, and none of those things want to absorb a Hydro Pump. And the big thing is that, okay, well, you would think, well, it's Empoleon. It's a Stealth Rock lead. It's an anti-lead, but we have Clefable. Why don't we just go to that? And the reason is because, well, one, Clefable makes sure that rocks do indeed go up. And additionally, Clefable makes sure that, or Clefable can actually get to a KO'd by Choice Spec, Surf, or Hydro Pump. Those sets have actually become a lot more common now because Choice Specs Empoleon is one of the strongest, both offensively and defensively, strongest water spammers in the entire game. And switching Clefable into a Specs Hydro Pump is just, yeah, like that's going to really severely limit the utility you maybe expect to get out of Clefable in the long run, especially when the opposing team likely has other special attackers which are enabled by Specs Empoleon being the breaker. So this is just another example of how the Blissyless Stall archetype is susceptible to things that are just, kind of normal special attackers, like Empoleon. See and Sense, Empoleon has also been used in the lead slot to get it to a KO on Clef, but I haven't seen that in a while, so... Anyway, we see Marshall trick off his Scarf to Jirachee, and Hippowdon is just sitting around here. Rocks do go up, which is good. And Pideous' team is not irreparably damaged, but she definitely has a bit of an uphill battle so far. Or I wouldn't really say an uphill battle, but, it looks like Marshall has a slight advantage here. Tricking the Jirachee early is really good, and so is bringing Starmie down to such low health because it makes spinning really, really difficult. We see Marshall switch in a Dragonite hard on the Clefable, which I don't really know if I agree with. I think that's a bit of a hasty play. I understand why he would have done that, but yeah, I don't know. I think that you're giving up your Mix Knight way, 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 way too easy. I think you're giving up your Mix Knight even easier if you aren't going to bother to spin in the first place, because now that Mix Knight is at 53% and parried when he could have maybe just went to Starmie in the first place and either tried to trick or try to spin. That Hydro Pump looks like it might be a Specs Pump. Okay, we're going to see T-Tar here, and last is probably going to be Latias or Gyarados from Marshall. Or actually, it could be a second Steel type. It's going to be something else that has the ability to break. We're going to see T-Tar come out and crunch. Okay, did not get the Pursuit turn right. Yeah, you see, this is actually... Okay, so, really what I think the sequence that should have been done here is you don't want to give up the Ghost, and by the Ghost, I mean D-Knight, which is your main breaker against a team like Pideous really early. So what really Marshall, I think, should have been trying to do is, if you get that Starmie in early, look, Hydro Pump from Starmie, which doesn't have leftovers, could very well be Specs, and I think that Hydro Pump probably is Choice Spec Starmie. Actually, maybe it's not. It might just be 252 attack Starmie. I'd have to run the calc. My mental calc is not entirely there for this, but, I mean, what you should really be doing here, and you can see how a team like Marshall's, should be feeding off each other, is if you hydro pump something, with a Specs Me or a faked, a feigned Specs Me, you bring in the Latias, and then, well, what does that mean? Well, Pideous has to go Laddie, and you have a free T-Tar switch. And T-Tar can pursuit the Laddie, which is the water resist, and that opens up Starmie in the future to hydro pump or spin or trick or do whatever it needs to do. And if Starmie is your spinner, you can most likely keep rocks off, at least for a time. Against a team like Pideous's, which has a Powdon as the rocker. And if you keep rocks off, what that means is D-Knight can come in without taking a lot of residual damage. And you can keep your breaker for the team. And because Marshall kind of, eschewed that and didn't really bother to play that line out, now Hippowdon is actually really, really annoying because Empoleon's parried, D-Knight's parried, Starmie is going to potentially take, I think it's a 76, it might die to EQ plus Sand after rocks. And, Rotom, Rotom is not really being touched by Hippowdon, but now that it's blown its Scarf, it can't really touch Powdon plus Clefable either. So we see a Metagross from Marshall, probably in Agility Gross, I'm guessing. It could be Trick Iron Ball, but okay, so Ice Punch, I'm going to guess it's Agility Gross because that's Choice Scarf Rotom. It could be potentially a dual Scarf build. I've seen those before, and I've used them myself. And Starmie is going to come in on the Scarm. I guess we're just going to see a Trick or a Spin here. Okay. Okay, I think that's almost definitely Specs, yeah. The thing is, I think at that point, I understand wanting to pump, but now if you're Specs, you really are losing your options here. And again, this is exactly why getting rid of this Latias, or at least trying to get rid of it earlier, probably would have worked out a little bit better. And you would have still preserved your D-Knight, so yeah, and that meant that Metagross might have an easier time too. Okay, so we see a D-Tar, actually, so it's not Pursuit. And an Aqua Tail, Earthquake might kill from here. Yes, okay. Alright, well, I think it was a roll, but I think it was a roll probably in Pideous' favor. Well, okay, I guess now we go back to, Starmie, and we see probably, a Hydro Pump again, or a Spin. Yeah, okay. Alright, 59, cool, but this Jirachee probably outspeeds that Starmie anyway, and that means that Rocks and Spikes are going to 100% stay up. Well, not like they wouldn't have stayed up anyway, because that Starmie could not switch in again, but, yeah, I mean, this is kind of what happens when you see, a stall team work as it is supposed to. Marshall is likely Agility Gross, but he probably can't break the rest of Pideous' team. It's possible if he had Thunder Punch. If he had Thunder Punch, I think it was possible for him to break her team, because he could, I think it's Shed Shell Scarm, and that means Scarm would be taking like 35 or so from Thunder Punch. And if you get lucky with paras or crit rolls, you can get rid of it. But it looks like this Jirachee is going to end up being the Metagross counter, which is ridiculous. But, as you can see, this is one of the few times where the Jirachee is actually countering a Metagross instead of vice versa. Of course, I'm using countering in a glib fashion there, but you get the idea. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. That actually might... Okay, so... Ice Punch, if we can see okay, so immediately thawed, and Whirlwinded out, into Empoleon, and GG. Yeah, that's going to be it. Clefable just solos from here. All Pideous really needs to do is get a Spike up, and we're just going to see Marshall forfeit, because he knows that it's over, and we're going to go to Game 3. So, finally, we get another Game 3 series, and this I really am going to want to analyze very deeply, because I know these players are going to bring their A-game for Game 3. So, we're going to see a Azelf and a Jirachee lead. Couldn't be two more classic leads than DPP if you tried, and we're going to see a Rocks into a T-Wave Lumberry. Okay, so Marshall very well might be trying a Paraspam build again. We see Iron Head come out. Azelf has probably some investment. What I think is really... What should be noted here is that back when DPP was the main gen, most Azelf, until the very end, when people started using things like anti-Lead Machamp. Most Azelf were just 252, 252, attack or special attack, speed, explosion, try and outspeed the opponent. Nowadays, it's actually, I think it probably because of Excal and his hyper offense. People realize that, well, actually, Azelf is one, not actually the frailest thing in the world. It has decent HP, mediocre defenses, but because it's neutral psychic typing, it actually manages to avoid a lot of common weaknesses that you would see in opposing leads, except for Scarf T-Tar. But, that's where things like Colberberry or defensively invested Azelf come in to survive a crunch plus sand roll after, and still manage to get rocks up. People realize that Azelf is actually very deceivingly bulky in the lead position, and what it can do with its great utility move pool is survive way more hits than you expect of it, and spread para. It can taunt things, it can use Fire Blast, it can U-turn out to gain momentum, and of course it can almost always explode. An explosion, even if it's completely uninvested, is still a strong enough move where you're going to be hitting something relatively hard. Even Skarm takes like 35% or so from a completely uninvested explosion. And Skarm, of course, does not really want to stay in on Azelf because it simply gets taunted and opens it up for something else to take momentum from it. So that's just a little tidbit on the history of Azelf here. And what makes it such a really good option for hyper-offensive teams is that it just can do so much and can be really relatively unpredictable, despite what it appears to be almost always the same set. It has a very wide breadth of options. Anyway, we are going to see Pideous exploiting that momentum right now as she pivots to Tran and then pivots back to Rotom, blocks a spin, and Marshall goes for a interesting... Okay, so basically what happened here, I'm going to rewind a little bit. As we see, okay, well, obviously Fire Blast on Starmie. Pideous is going to pivot to Rotom, and what Marshall's doing here is Marshall's basically saying, okay, the reason the double spin is attempted here is because look at the structure of Marshall's team. Jirachee, Starmie. What do we think Marshall has in the back? Pretty good shot, especially if Marshall is running another Paraspam team. It's a Sebitar. Now, Pideous is an aggressive player, and Marshall is saying, okay, well, look, she is switching her Scarf Tom in. He thinks it's Scarf Tom, and she knows that I have a T-Tar in the back. Because Pideous knows that I have a T-Tar in the back, she is probably going to double out her Rotom into something else, and if I just spin twice on Scarf Rotom, because I don't think she would want to surrender it this early in the game, I can get rid of rocks, and I can basically kill her momentum, what she expects to be a T-Tar switch. Only problem is, Pideous's Rotom is actually not Scarf. It might be Specs, it could be Colbur, HP Fight, I've used that set before, but we do finally see the T-Tar, and we see that Marshall, oh, geez, wow, okay, well, I got my answer. That is Choice Specs Rotom and Choice Band T-Tar. But we see exactly how that logic kind of played out. And we see Zelf come in, and, Zelf is just going to get a free U-turn. And Jirachee is going to come in, and we see again how the type of offense that Pideous is using here is just feeding off of itself. And it also raises another question, which is, well, okay, Pideous is not using Scarf Tom. How about Tran? Is Tran Choice Scarf? Is it Shuka? Is it Pasho? Marshall is kind of now at a point where he's guessing, where it's like, well, I'm not sure what her speed control is. And it turns out that Tran is not Choice Scarf either. Tran is probably a Shuka or a Pasho variant. And we see Pideous go out to Azelf. Marshall correctly predicts the Mega Horn. Basically, Pideous was trying to save that Chi-Tran, and instead sack Azelf to an explosion to break the sub. But we see Breloom come in and C-Bomb, and we're going to see a Mega Horn. Okay, so it's probably Rock Slide last if he didn't go for Fire Punch there. Going to get some solid ship on the Breloom, but of course now the problem for Marshall is he's going to have a difficult time breaking the rest of Pideous's team. Or not breaking, but overcoming Pideous' offense because Rhyperior and T-Tar are both essentially dead. Celebi is asleep, and this Breloom has Focus Punch, which is going to do in the sand about 30 or so percent to Celebi, even the most defensive. And Pideous has a lot of things that she can use to take advantage of a sleeping Celebi regardless. And looking at Marshall's team, the last is probably Zapdos, which means that something like Heatran with a weakened Rhyperior and a dead T-Tar is even more dangerous unless Marshall can manage to pair it. And we just see Pideous just spamming Focus Punch here. And while Marshall will probably be able to get rocks up with his Celebi, the big issue here is that this is, I think, the same T-Wave Grass Knot set. And the reason, I'll be honest, I think that set is a really weird set. I'm not a big fan of using rocks and T-Wave on Celebi, because obviously you need Recover, and then the issue becomes, well, okay, Celebi is one of the best Breloom counters in the game, but what happens when your Celebi is essentially unable to OHKO Breloom? Or forget OHKO Breloom, do any damage to Breloom at all. And we see this Breloom, heal up to a 73% from just sitting there and Focus Punching. And finally Zapdos comes in, and we're going to see a HP Ice from Marshall and probably a Spore for Pideous. That Breloom is probably invested in HP to a point where Pideous didn't really need to worry about losing Breloom to something like an HP Ice high roll. And she probably is thinking this is just the same team as before, so it's going to be T-Wave HP Ice. I don't really need to worry about dying from Heat Wave. Anyway, Celebi is going to come back in, and this time Celebi can relatively freely recover on Breloom here. But we're going to see Heatran come right back in, and Marshall makes a really aggressive and a really good play. Still not in his favor, but this gives him at least a chance if he gets lucky. Of course, with Fire Blast hitting there, this is going to become really, really difficult. What Marshall basically needs to do is manage to get as many kills with Rhyperior as possible. And while he may be able to get a kill here, Pideous almost surely has something that can come in on Rhyperior and take advantage of the sleeping Zapdos, and the Jirachee is the last slot. And it turns out she does, and it is a perfect Pokemon for the scenario, Metagross. Metagross is not really bothered by Jirachee to the extent another sweeper would be, and the Zapdos is at 0 turns asleep, so it's not really at risk of waking up and automatically shutting Metagross down. But we're just going to see Pideous go to Zapdos here and not even fool around with this, whether that's Choice Scarf Metagross or not. We see an HP Ice come out from Pideous, kill the Zapdos. Jirachee is going to come in and probably be Marshall's last chance here. Oddly enough, it is possible that Jirachee can win. And what I think is really interesting about Pideous' team is this is actually a team that I played in or against Pideous. Pideous used it versus me in DPP Circuit finals last week, and I managed to overcome it. But it's a really interesting team, and obviously the gift of the team is that it's utilizing Heatran, Metagross, Zapdos, Rotom to try and toy with the opponent's perception of what a Choice Scarf around offense is, or what it may be. So in this case, you're thinking, well, it's probably Rotom. No, Rotom's Choice Specs. Okay, it's probably Heatran. No, Heatran is a berry, or some other crazy item. Okay, well, maybe it's Metagross. No, Metagross is, I think it's Kustap on this team. Okay, maybe it's Zapdos. And it turns out it is Zapdos, which is actually, Choice Scarf Zapdos is one of the least likely, especially on a team which doesn't have a spinner, Pokemon to have a Choice Scarf. So what it's really doing is it's utilizing a very interesting element of surprise strategy, toying around with who the Choice Scarfer is to gain offensive momentum off the opponent's mispredictions or assumptions on what the team's Choice Scarfer is or Revenge Killer is. And I think that's a really interesting thing to do. And the double electric strategy is also actually really, really cool. Specs Rotom is incredibly powerful, deceptively powerful with T-Bolt. And after a round of rocks, it has a chance to 2 a KO on invested T-Tar. And we're going to see, anyway, at this point, we're going to see Jirachee try its best to beat this Heatran. And believe it or not, it could happen. I've seen it happen before. It's not in Marshall's favor, but it is very possible. And really, all Marshall needs to do is beat this Heatran, because then Marshall can T-Wave the Metagross and try and OHKO it with Earthquake from Hyperior. But we're finally going to see Pideous break through and Fire Blast at Jirachee, and that is going to manage to kill it. What Marshall has to do now is try for a Mega Horn. Yep, Mega Horn, so he can get enough HP to sub. And we're gonna see a para, which means that it is possible that Marshall can win this. We see a sub, and we're going to see another para. Oh boy, okay. See, that's really unfortunate. We're going to see an Earthquake, Shuka Berry. Okay, so it's... Alright, well, now it comes down to whether or not Metagross can live an Earthquake from Hyperior. And Metagross has incredible defense. We're going to see an Earthquake, and we're going to see Marshall manage to win out. Wow. That was interesting. But it was... Honestly, I thought Pideous was going to win that for sure. Of course, the outcomes there were relatively the same. I'm trying to think if Pideous could have done something a bit different there. But I'm not really sure. I think that all things considered, this was a game where Marshall especially played to his outs at the very end. That Mega Horn to gain the potential substitute was really, really smart because, if you just kill Heatran there by using Earthquake or Rock Slide, look, that Metagross was always outspeeding him unless it was Iron Ball, Marshall could have maybe been like, okay, well, look, I think this is an Iron Ball trick Metagross. I'm just going to go ahead and try and outspeed it and hope I guess the set right, but instead what Marshall did was he, again, played to his outs, and he Mega Horned it, hoping for the extra leftovers so he could get a sub, which is, if you need any more evidence that these are two really good DPP players, there you go. That's a very forward-thinking play. More so deceptively than maybe you would think it is, just by being like, oh, well, he had to get the leftovers. Like, yeah, he had to get the leftovers, but, like, it takes a lot to even think of clicking Mega Horn in a scenario like that. And, it's just a good example of the type of thinking these players are really undergoing in these games. And, again, going back to the turn with the Rotom versus the Starmie, that is an example of kind of next level mind games where one player is over predicting, and that over prediction is not just based on, oh, I think they're going to switch to this, but it's I think they think that I'm going to switch to this because they know my team structure. And you're making the assumption that, well, they know what my team structure is, so they're going to predict accordingly and then reacting to that. And then, of course, getting proven wrong, but, that's part of the mind games of Pokemon. And it's what makes a series like this really fun to watch, especially fun to watch live. Anyway, this was a great game. I'm really, really glad that these two guys showed off in round 6 of the DPP Invitational. And I hopefully will be able to commentate some more games between these two in the near future. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This has been PDC, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.